Hey, if you're watching this video, if you clicked on it, you're probably expecting somewhat of a Wheel of Time, like, expert opinion, something like that, right? Because normally when I talk about A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, it is very much an expert's opinion. I am an expert fan. I love A Song of Ice and Fire and the source material so much, I consider myself a fanboy. In this video, it's a little bit different. I'm talking about a show for the source material that I haven't read anything of it. The only thing that I know about it is the questions that I have while watching the show that I choose to look up. Because obviously spoilers are rife. This book series is like 17 books. But one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video was because I saw several people in my comment section and just online in general that are hesitant to jump into this because the hate for the first 3 episodes of Wheel of Time are similar to the hate from Game of Thrones Season 8. Obviously, a lot of that comes from book purists, but in this video, I want to try to get to the bottom of it. Please, if you enjoy this and you want me to make more Wheel of Time breakdown videos, like specifically when episode 4 comes out next Friday, then, like this video, leave a comment down below, and then make sure you subscribe. That way you'll get an alert every single time I make a Wheel of Time video. Alright, so first things first. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I have not read the books. Now, that is like a double-edged sword because on one hand, it fucking sucks because half the time the show is going on, I don't know what's happening. I don't even remember these characters' names, to be honest. Like, I kind of do, but then I don't, right? So, that's one side of it. The other side of it is because I haven't read the source material, I have nothing to compare this to. I can just enjoy it for what it is. I don't constantly have to be like, hold up, what the fuck? Why did they choose to do that with this character when that happened to that character, or it didn't even happen at all, right? I don't have to deal with that because I've never read the source material. I also don't know what's going on half the time, right? So that's the double-edged sword. To be completely honest, I think you kind of have to be somewhere in between. You kind of can't know the source material inside and out because you're always going to be expecting something that most likely won't happen because it's an adaptation and an interpretation, not a mirror image depiction. But also, you kind of need to know some of the backstory because for the most part, one of my biggest gripes with this series for just the first 3 episodes is that a lot of the backstory and the subtle nods to the different women's groups and who this person is and why this character does this certain things, those are nods to book fans. You have to know the source material to get that shit. To be completely honest, Eamon's Field to me is no different than where they were at in that city. I don't know. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around. But one of the things that I did see that really no one should do at all because it's impossible is comparing this show to Game of Thrones. Or at least Game of Thrones Season 1 or Season 1 through 4 because that's the most critically acclaimed seasons, right? No. Don't do that. You'll fucking fail miserably. Anything you try to compare to Game of Thrones, it's not on that same level. You have to completely pretend that Game of Thrones doesn't exist to enjoy this show. Because otherwise, you're going to be constantly did they steal entire premises from the show? Why is this guy got wolf swat? You just don't do that. From what I've seen so far, this show has legs, and it will run for several seasons and be successful and be a good fantasy series, but it's never going to be as good as Game of Thrones. That's just impossible. The only way to be as good as Game of Thrones is to make another Game of Thrones show. Now, in particular, so I don't just sound one-sided, basically, this show is more of a fantasy story set in a fantasy world, right? Magic is very much real. It's apparent. There are people that can use it. They know it's a real thing. Anyone can find out more about magic. It's not like with Game of Thrones, which is a medieval political story with sprinklings of fantasy, right? That's the big difference. Game of Thrones can reach a wider audience because it covers so many different dramas. It's a historical drama, right? So there's several things that influence that story that happened in real life history. It's got fantasy elements. It's got feminist ideas, right? So it can reach a wide audience. Same with Wheel of Time, except for it's different. It's very much delves into the fantasy aspect of the fantasy trope, right? So magic is very much a major part of this world, and that could be kind of hard for some people to swallow if they're coming into it thinking that this is going to be like Game of Thrones. It's a massive turnoff, because in the very, first episode, you have crazy looking fucking creatures. Obviously Game of Thrones had zombies, but it's a little bit, for some reason, I can wrap my head more around something that used to be a human coming back to life than something that's like a fawn, like a ox, fucking centaur, beast, minotaur thing. I don't even know what the fuck they call the Trollocs, but, they're not orcs. Then another thing that I saw people complaining about that I kind of want to address in this is like book changes. So apparently the way they leave Emonsfield and Perrin being married, that's actually not what happens in the books. There's a rumor that they had originally wanted to do 10 episodes for the first season, but the executive producers put the kibosh on that and said, no, make it 8 episodes. So that's why apparently the first 2 episodes, or the first episode itself, seems kind of rushed and a little bit murky. Like the plot isn't as strong as it is in episodes 2 and 3, and then in the upcoming episode 4. I can kind of agree with that. Like I said, I have the benefit of not really knowing what to compare it to. I think, honestly, I agree with the rhetoric that, yeah, they did rush a little bit of it, but the changes they made apparently explain the character's backstory better. Like, the problem with adapting a novel to a TV series is that a lot of the internal monologue that POV characters that you're reading about have, it's really easy to explain motivation and why characters decide to do certain things, right? That's really easy to explain when you're reading it, but it's hard to visualize. So the writers and the showrunner, Rafe Judkins, decided to show physical things that happen to these characters to help manifest their personality traits. And apparently in the long run, a lot of the book fans that liked the series and its changes, right? They said that in the long run, that's actually going to benefit the characters more because it explains more about their backstory. That's one of the biggest problems when you're adapting one medium to another medium. It's like, especially from books to TV or books to film. It's impossible to get across some of the nuances that are portrayed in the books because you're reading words, and a lot of the stuff that the reader imagines is hard to visualize on screen. The only thing that I have a problem with the changes from the books, it's a little bit weird, but Rand, spoilers, I guess, he's the dragon reborn. So they changed it and made it seem as though Moraine doesn't know who the dragon is, but it's very well clear that when you're reading Rand's internal monologue, you kind of know that he's the dragon. He's super strong and all this other shit, but he's supposed to be 6'5" and 240 pounds. I don't even know the actor's name who's playing Rand, but he is not 6'5" and 240 pounds. Also, Moraine is supposed to be legally a midget. She's supposed to be 5 foot. I don't know if that's the only problem I have. It's I don't know if the author knew how tall actual people are. That's insane. It's he didn't want them to find people to portray them accurately because of how tall. Rand is supposed to be dunk the tall. Also, Roose Bolton's beard looks terrible. Some of the wigs in this show looked ridiculous. So you could see the fake glue part on Tam's face. Roose Bolton, you could see that. I don't know. That was one of my biggest gripes with it is the costumes are kind of all over the place. They're super bright. And then also some of the prosthesis on the wigs look terrible. But one of my favorite moments from the show, and this will be the last thing that I mention before I get out of here, I enjoy the idea that this series is supposed to be set in our own future, right? So at the very beginning of the first episode, we saw shots of skyscrapers that have been dilapidated, that had overgrowth on them. So I think that's the principal idea behind this, is that the time that this story is set in, the Third Age or whatever, is supposed to be after modern day times had been wiped out, and this is thousands of years after that. I don't know. But I will continue to watch this series. I do think it's awesome, and I do think it's silly to compare it to Game of Thrones because they're kind of in the same genre, but they have their own niche, right? So like I said, leave me a comment down below if you want me to break down episode 4 and the remaining episodes for season 1 of Wheel of Time. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and if you could, please do me a massive favor and slap a like on this video. The like goal is going to be 420. Get it?